When a young mother offered her seat to an old veteran, she thought she was simply being kind. She moved to the row behind him, but then she realized who he was and felt a wave of disbelief. Emma Bry and her daughter Rosie had been waiting on the plane for almost an hour, stuck on the ground for an unknown reason. Frustrated, Emma muttered, "We're going to be glued to the ground longer than the actual flight." Suddenly, an elderly man entered, causing Emma's irritation to soften. He looked frail and moved slowly but had a kind smile. He took a seat behind Emma, who returned to cuddling her daughter. However, she soon heard the veteran making noises of discomfort. Concerned, she turned around and asked if he was okay. He replied that he was fine, just bothered by the cramped seating. Emma thought it unwise for him to sit by the window, given his age and weak bladder, but he insisted it was not her concern. Feeling empathetic, Emma decided to offer her spacious front row seat, thinking he could use it more. The veteran hesitated but eventually accepted her offer, thanking her as she expressed her gratitude for his service. As Emma settled into her new seat, she noticed the lettering on the man's hat. He had served in 2 wars. While gazing out the window, she heard the sound of pages turning from the seat in front of her. Curious, she peeked through the gap in the backrest and saw the veteran looking through a thick photo album filled with yellowed photographs of soldiers. Emma felt a surge of compassion, but was taken aback when she heard the veteran sob. "Are you okay?" she asked. He reassured her he was fine, continuing to browse until he stopped at a particular page. Then something intriguing happened. Emma, gazing out of her new seat, heard the sound of pages turning from the row in front of her. The pages sounded thick, heavier than those of a typical book. Curious, she peeked through the gap in the backrest and saw the old man flipping through a large photo album. The yellowed pages suggested it was decades old, and the images inside were stunning. Emma saw numerous black and white photos of soldiers in the field and realized they were likely his wartime comrades. A wave of compassion filled her heart, but it abruptly halted when she heard the veteran sobbing softly. "Are you okay?" she asked, and he assured her he was fine, continuing to look through the album until he paused at a particular page. Emma's breath caught as she watched, and she gasped in shock, covering her mouth to stifle her reaction. Unable to remain seated, she approached the row where the veteran sat and gently tapped the shoulder of the woman next to him. "I'm sorry, miss. Can we switch seats? I really need to talk to this man." The woman glanced at Emma's empty window seat and agreed, as she planned to sleep through the flight anyway. Relieved, Emma sat beside the veteran, who looked puzzled by her sudden change of seats and the wide-eyed expression on her face. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, scanning her bewildered look. Emma inquired about the album. "What is this book, sir?" He wasn't secretive and began flipping through the pages, showing her the contents. "I fought in 2 major wars for my country. The first was in 1945 during the Normandy invasion in World War II, and the second was in Korea. These are pictures from those times." The man shared detailed stories of his experiences, recounting battles and his close friendships with fellow soldiers. "War creates an unbreakable bond, you know," he said. Emma listened quietly, her eyes widening with each page he turned. The veteran assumed her reaction was due to his captivating tales, but in reality, it was because he was getting closer to a specific photo. "Can I see one photo, please?" Emma asked, describing the image that had caught her attention earlier. The veteran quickly flipped through the album and revealed the picture. Emma instantly began to cry softly and hugged him unexpectedly. Wiping away her tears, she asked him to share the story behind the photo, which he gladly did. Throughout the rest of the flight, he shared intimate anecdotes about the men in that image, deepening Emma's emotional response. After about an hour, the airplane landed, and the veteran thought their time together had come to an end. However, Emma had other plans. She asked him to follow her into the airport's arrival hall, insisting, "Please trust me." To her surprise, the old man agreed. As they entered the arrival hall, a middle-aged man greeted them. Emma rushed to him, introducing him as her father. "Just a moment, please," she said to the veteran before whispering something in her father's ear. Upon hearing it, Her father had the same emotional reaction as Emma had on the plane, tears filling his eyes as he asked the veteran about his purpose in the city. The veteran explained that he was scheduled to speak at a college hearing about his war experiences. "That's why I brought my photo album and wore my veteran's hat." Both father and daughter nodded, then asked if he had a few hours to spare, as they had something important to show him. "What is it?" the veteran asked, but Emma simply replied that it was a surprise. The veteran hesitated. Although he had time to spare, following a relative stranger to an unknown destination wasn't something he had planned. He studied Emma's face again and noticed her gentle smile as she wiped away another tear. There was something trustworthy about her, and ultimately, it was that sincerity, combined with her genuine interest in his life, that convinced him to go along. They got into Emma's father's car and drove away from the airport, passing by the hotel where the veteran was supposed to stay. The bustling city gradually gave way to a quieter suburban area, filled with trees and charming houses lining the streets. The veteran asked once more where they were headed, but Emma simply replied, "We're almost there. Please trust me." She assured him that he would enjoy their surprise, but knowing it in advance would ruin his reaction. "I apologize for the secrecy, but your wait is over. We're here." The car came to a stop in front of the smallest house in the neighborhood. It was old yet inviting. Emma and her daughter quickly exited and opened the front door, while the veteran remained in the car, whispering, "What is this place? Why am I here?" Emma smiled and gestured for him to come inside. Having come this far, the veteran figured it would be a waste to turn back. He stepped out of the car and walked down the hallway of the house, which had a distinct 60s vibe. Orange drapes hung in the windows, and a light, musky scent filled the air. However, the decor wasn't why he was invited. Ahead, he saw Emma and her father standing beside a large chair in the living room which faced away from him. He could just make out the silhouette of a gray-haired figure sitting in it. Emma leaned down and spoke to the person, and the veteran wondered who it could be. Just then, the individual stood up and turned to face him. It was another elderly man, at least as old as he was. The newcomer squinted at the veteran, as if trying to recognize him. After a few moments of confusion, his eyes widened in shock, mirroring the expressions of Emma and her father. "Charles, is that you?" The elderly man approached Charles and embraced him tightly. "What is happening?" The veteran's name was indeed Charles, but how did this man know him? Charles stood frozen as the old man cried and squeezed him, but everything changed when the man loosened his grip, allowing Charles to see his face up close. Recognition hit him like a wave, and he broke down in tears, returning the hug while bombarding the man with questions, especially for Emma, who had initiated this extraordinary journey. "How did you know who I was on the plane?" he asked. Emma smiled and said the answer was simple. She left the room and returned with something covered by her hands. "The man you're hugging is my grandpa. He shared many stories about a soldier he met during his time in the army, someone who saved his life multiple times. That soldier is you, Charles. You were my grandfather's best friend, and according to him, he wouldn't be alive today without you. And by extension, neither would my father, myself, or my daughter," Emma explained emotionally. She thanked Charles for everything he had done for her grandfather during the war and revealed why she was certain he was the right person. Turning the object in her hands, she revealed a picture frame, the same photo that Charles had in his album. It was her grandfather's prized possession, a reminder of his best friend, someone he thought he had lost forever. "When I saw that picture on the plane and your face, I immediately knew who you were and that I had to reconnect you two." Charles was astonished by Emma's story. He couldn't believe that such a simple moment could lead to such a profound reunion. He thanked her sincerely and promised to find a way to repay her kindness. But Emma didn't need any repayment. "You've already done enough," she said. Charles nodded and laid his photo album flat on the table, flipping through it until he found the page with the photo of the two of them together. "Do you remember that day, William?" he asked his long-lost friend. The 93-year-old William nodded, gently caressing the photo. Charles continued, explaining that they had been best friends during the war, always looking out for each other. He confirmed that he had saved Emma's clumsy grandfather multiple times in the heat of battle. However, during their last mission, everything went wrong. A minefield stood between them and the enemy, and Charles watched as William bravely crossed it with other troops. Just as William reached the end, a massive explosion occurred. From that moment on, Charles never saw his friend again and believed William had been killed. In wartime, it's always bad news when a soldier goes missing. If you don't hear from them afterward, it usually means one thing: a silent soldier is a dead one, Charles said. But it turned out that wasn't the case. "How did you survive that explosion?" Charles asked. Emma's grandfather explained that the entire battle felt like a blur. He remembered crossing the field and almost reaching the other side unscathed until a soldier beside him stepped on a mine, triggering the explosion. "The next thing I remembered is waking up in a field hospital. William hadn't been directly hit by the blast, although it looked that way from a distance." Charles nodded, saying he had thought he lost his friend that day. The debris from the explosion had struck William, leaving him with scrap metal in his leg and unfit for combat. "I was sent home after that and never returned to war again. My commanding officer told me we lost the battle and that the entire battalion was wiped out." "I thought I lost you too," William said to Charles. But apparently, that wasn't true. The two friends embraced again, feeling their bond rekindle. Though they were old men now, they had a lifetime of stories to catch up on. The veterans spent the rest of the day talking, smiling, and reminiscing about the good old days. It was a heartwarming sight, and Emma felt immense joy seeing her grandfather smile like that again. It had been a long time since she had seen such happiness on his face. From that moment on, the two men were inseparable once more, even spending Christmas together that year.